Prior to 2020, I think most people would agree 2008 was a pretty crappy year. The big issue, of course, being the economic crash and the unprecedented number of home foreclosures. You guys were there, I don't have to remind you. But that stuff was a macro-level problem. On a micro level, things were pretty okay for me. By November of that year, my wife and I were celebrating our 3rd year of living here in Michigan. Our 2nd year of living in an apartment where flushing the toilet and operating the microwave weren't things you could reach out to do from the couch. And our 1st year as a married couple. However, both of our families still lived in our respective hometowns in Ohio. As the only members with enough sense to move out of that state, we were the ones obligated to make the 3.5-hour drive back there for holiday gatherings. Not an outrageous drive, but enough to be annoying. Thanksgiving was at least better than Christmas in that regard, since the weather was generally clear in November, but there seemed to always be a snowstorm in December. At the time, I worked for AMC Theaters. Movie theaters are an industry that does not close on any holiday, so getting time off around those dates is rare. But in 2008, I was able to get Thanksgiving Day off by working the day before and after. Which meant we had to get up early on Turkey Day, drive 3.5 hours to my family's gathering around noon, hang out for an appropriate length of time, then drive another 30 minutes to Sarah's family for an evening meal before leaving for the return 3.5-hour drive so that I could get home, go to sleep, and then return to work. I've always been indifferent to Thanksgiving, but during that time of my life, I was actively loathing it. The posted speed limit on U.S. Route 23 between Upper Sandusky and Findlay is 65 miles per hour. I was doing 70 because I was raised to believe cops don't care if you're only going 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, and I was in a hurry to get home, but not so much of a hurry that I needed to further break the rules. US 23 is technically a highway, but for much of its length in northern Ohio, it functions like a freeway with higher speed limits, divided lanes, rest areas, and occasional on and off ramps. I'm not a city planner or a road commissioner, but I think of those as freeway traits. There's one key element that US 23 has that freeways don't, and that's intersections. Just outside of Findlay, there's one intersection in particular that I later learned was quite notorious. It's not there anymore, but at the time there was a road that went across both divided lanes of 23 with room for one car to stop in between the lanes before crossing the next set and continuing on to whatever back road it connected to. This intersection was regulated by a flashing yellow light for 23 and a flashing red for this other road. For 4 years I've driven this route and almost never seen a car crossing here. On Thanksgiving night of 2008, there was one. I noticed it crossing the first set of lanes and then stop at the flashing red light in the island as I rounded the curve on 23. As I got closer at 70 miles per hour, the car began to lurch forward to cross my lanes. I began to slow just in case, but then the other car stopped partway in the left lane. Relieved, I switched my foot back to the gas. That car lurched forward again, and the world went black. My next memory is sitting in the car, facing the wrong way on the road, some flickering flames under the hood, and Sarah saying her seatbelt was stuck while strangers were pulling our doors open. I undid her seatbelt, we got out, and the strangers escorted us to the safe side of the ditch. The moments after a car accident are some of the most surreal feelings one can experience outside of larger disasters or military conflict. You feel very much disconnected with what's going on around you while simultaneously slowly realizing how much it will very much change your life going forward. We had a lot to be thankful for that night. Thankful for the engineers that designed cars safe enough that the occupants could experience a head-on collision at roughly 65 miles per hour and come out relatively unscathed. Thankful that we were in fact relatively unscathed. Sarah had bruising from the seatbelt, and I had a contusion on my ankle which limited my walking for a week or so. And thankful that that car which kept Sarah and I safe, but had itself been completely totaled, was not my own car. I had borrowed my parents' spare car for this drive home while they took my car to their preferred mechanic. There were a lot of ups and downs after this accident. After leaving the hospital, I called my employers to let them know I would be unable to make it into work the next day. Despite explaining the situation to them, their reaction was to remind me I can only call off a small number of times before a write-up, and to tell me to call around and find someone to cover my shift. I reiterated that I was in Ohio, had no car, couldn't walk, and had just survived a serious car accident, and hung up. On the upside, the police ruled that the accident was definitively the fault of the other car, and their insurance was quick to sort out a resolution. We got our medical expenses covered, my parents got the value of the car for a replacement, and we got a small check for pain and suffering that we used as a down payment on a house that we were able to afford thanks to the economic crash and massive amounts of foreclosures. So for us, a macro-level and micro-level tragedy combined to equal a win, which is probably a really terrible lesson to take away from this, but here we are.